All right, with sports, let's get straight into the ride. We're outside here at Greenpoint, of course, with McDonald's, and also it is Morning Live. My name is Thabo Kaba. You know how we always do it on the morning. And of course, we're here to talk to someone quite important when it comes to, rehab, especially when it comes to physiotherapy. She's been in the game for 20 years, and she's been doing this also with the Springboks, and also at an amateur and also at an elite level. Of course, we've got Rene Naylor. Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Tavo, and good morning to all the viewers.
All right, so let's talk about it, right? So when a player is facing a tough time on the sidelines in particular, and they're not on the field for quite a long time, how does it feel and what do they go through in that particular moment?
Yes, it's a very tough process for an athlete when they have to move from an injury into, particularly if it's a long-term injury. And I think the worst is the isolation. Isolation from the team, isolation from their sport that played so many different roles in their life. And you as a physiotherapist, you're usually there when they're all on their own months after the date of the injury, where they have to struggle with, sometimes the instinct is there to return, but the body's not ready. And you have to guide that process.
Okay, let's talk about, the mental process in particular, right? Because obviously when you're out for a long time, especially on the sidelines, there's that way in how you have to deal with it mentally. And like you said now, it is a bit of a struggle. So what are the tools that are maybe put in place, especially mentally in that particular time when you're out in particular?
Yes, that's a very important question because, we often speak about mental toughness, which is very different to mental strength. Because mental toughness is you train through the pain, which is what we as South Africans, we talk about all the time, that spirit and that fight. But the mental strength is really about that patience to wait for the time for our tendons to heal, for the muscles to heal. And that can be a lonely journey. And I think it's important for all the stakeholders. Let us not wait for a tragedy to step in, but rather to be there to monitor. Is there a change in this player's is he irritable? Is he having a change in sleep patterns? Is he really struggling psychologically with the process? And then ask for help and get a psychologist involved. Because I, as a physiotherapist, can notice those signs, but it's not my profession really to deal with if there is a mental illness that develops as a result of an injury.
Now, Rene, of course, you deal with, the elite level and also the amateur levels as well. So you've seen different backgrounds, different communities, different types of people coming into the background when it comes to physiotherapy, right? So looking at that, how does it work for you looking at the different backgrounds, and what have you learned in your particular journey of seeing that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one because firstly, there is definitely a gap between amateur and professional level in South Africa. And South Africa, we are producing world-class athletes. Our school system, sporting system, is like no other system in the world. There's nowhere globally we have a system like we have here, where we are producing athletes. We have thousands of people attending fixtures, school fixtures, and there thousands of rands being pumped into, millions being pumped into school sport. But there's still that gap between the actual competitiveness and well-being of the player and the athlete. And we are not there where we are actually able to protect this talent, which is a concern. We are losing athletes not because of injury, but because of a poor system. And possibly also placing a very young athlete in a high-performance environment. Sorry.
We want to say, of course, thank you so much for watching us on Morning Live to our SABC 2 viewers. Do keep on watching us, of course, on Channel 4 is where you can be watching us. So thank you so much to the SABC 2 viewers who've been watching Morning Live. And, of course, we're continuing the conversation right here on Morning Live in particular. And as you've been saying, right, you've been continuing your point to say there's a huge gap in particular when it comes to the different communities and the different types of people. So I wanted to tap into the sports stars in particular, right? When they come from different backgrounds and they are from different gaps, how do you in particular put those same people in the rooms, put them together and make them feel not necessarily as one, but not like it's different, the gap is somehow found?
Yes, inclusivity is such an integral part of performance. You cannot perform if you do not feel part of your team and able to be yourself. speak your language and enjoy what makes you feel good about yourself. That's very important in terms of performance. And I think as a medical team, we also play a role in that. And about trusting. You want your athletes to trust you because you want them to be completely honest with you. They may not be able to be honest with a coach about what they're experiencing, but they must be able to trust their medical team. And that is our role as a medical person, to ensure that every player should feel like that. I always say to young physios, treat every player as a World Cup winning captain, and make them feel special and feel safe to come and speak to you about whatever they need to. And in that way, you actually eliminate the different backgrounds.
Right. Rene, I like that you mentioned that. You're speaking about young physios in particular. You're speaking about young people as well. Now, some would say you are basically like the mother in this situation as a physiotherapist, right? And as a mother, you know what it's like also to be a mother, right? What is your role to the young physiotherapist, but also just, your role as a mother when someone is recovering and facing that period? Because you are now the substitute mother, if that makes sense, right? And how important is that role for you? How do you play that role?
Yes, it's a very important role that you play, because our primary function is usually looking at physical performance. And as a parent, I'd like to say that is not just looking at physical performance, but also looking at the mental side. Being able to ask a young athlete how they are feeling, but genuinely how they are feeling, that they can actually report that to you in a safe space. And you can make a decision about whether that person needs psychological intervention from a professional. And that should be easy for an athlete to ask for, irrespective of whether they are at school or at an elite level. To be able to ask for help in a psychological way should be the same as asking for a physio to treat my painful hamstring. And I think we need to close that gap where people are, maybe there's a stigma attached to that, because it's going to show that I'm weak if I ask for that assistance. As a parent, don't just focus on performance, but also focus on the load, particularly if you've got a young school athlete. That becomes more important as their bodies are still growing. Their muscles, their tendons, their growth plates are still developing.
All right. You've heard it here first, of course. This is from Rene Naylor, 20 years in the game for the Springboks, and also just a top physiotherapist when it comes to all things that comes with that. Of course, SABC Sport, we just wanted to let you know that SABC Sport, of course, will be having a watch party right here at Greenpoint McDonald's, if you do want to check that out, because it's going to be quite big. And you know that SABC will be here for all things when it comes to the World Cup final. You do want to be here, because we will be here all day long when it comes to the SABC. So we'll be back straight after the break. You're watching Morning Live.